Today's game is one that is hailed as one of the best games ever made. However, I think that the nostalgia frosting is spread a little too thick on this cake.
When I was a kid, I was not really into Ducktales at all. It was a show that I watched as it was on before a show I wanted to watch, like Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, or Darkwing Duck. Ducktales was just a show that didn't interest me, but I did love the movie Legend of the Lost Lamp. I never thought that Ducktales was a bad cartoon by any means, but I feel that it didn't offer me anything in terms of entertainment. Maybe someday I'll go back and rewatch some episodes. I really wasn't into many of the Disney cartoons. As I said, I like Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, and Darkwing Duck. But I also like Goof Troop, Aladdin, and when it came to Bonkers, I only liked the episodes with Lucky Patel. Timon and Pumbaa was hit or miss for me, and Buzz Lightyear of Star Command was the last Disney cartoon I ever watched. And that's when I stopped watching Disney cartoons. So that's 6 I really liked, and 2 that I sorta liked.
And I know that a lot of people are going to bring this up, but no, I didn't like Gargoyles. I'm sorry, I don't think that it's a bad show. It's good. It's just something that I was never able to get into, although my dad was really into it.
I was just more into Warner Brothers cartoons like Tiny Toons probably being one of my favorite WB cartoons of all time, Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, Road Rovers, Freakazoid, Tasmania, Batman, Batman Beyond, Superman, and the list goes on. And while the NES was my first video game console, I never had the DuckTales game, nor did I ever rent it, and none of my friends ever talked about it as they were more into Mario. So I have absolutely no history with this game prior to this review, so hopefully I can give you the answers to any questions you may have. And for the purposes of this review, mostly padding, I'll also be looking at Ducktales Remastered. In Japan, Ducktales is known as Wanpaku Daku Yume Boken, which literally translates to Naughty Duck's Dream Adventures. Capcom had worked with Disney before with licensed games, but it was mostly Hudson Soft that developed them, so Ducktales was the first licensed game that Capcom themselves developed. Some of the staff that worked on the Mega Man games also worked on this game, and because of that, the game uses the same engine that's used in the Mega Man games. In fact, some other Disney licensed game developed by Capcom use the same engine, like the Darkwing Duck game, and I think the 2 Rescue Ranger games.
It was a different time back then. You could recycle game engines, sprites, and sounds, and no one would care, and they would probably praise you for it too. Do that nowadays, and people are outside your door with torches and pitchforks.
The game is pretty good graphically for an NES game. There's a lot of colors and detail, so the game pops really well. The music is done pretty well too, but Capcom was pretty good at NES games in those days. Some say that the music for the Moon level is the best the NES has to offer, and it is a catchy tune. The controls are logical for their time. A jumps and B will allow you to use your cane. Press up against something and Scrooge will use it like a golf club. Hold B while pressing down in the air and you'll use it like a pogo stick. That way you can bounce off of enemies like a traditional platformer, and you'll be able to make your way across spike floors with bouncing. You can use the pogo bounce sort of indefinitely. It seems that if you land on an edge of a platform it'll stop, because there's times where I questioned why it stopped because I didn't let go of the B button, so I'm not sure if it's meant to do that or it's a bug. When you start the game there's 5 levels you can choose from, with a 6th final level, and the levels are pretty short and encourage exploration. Like with the African Mines level, you need to find a key in Transylvania, and the Amazon needs you to pay $300,000 to get past a certain area, but you can bypass that by pogo jumping off an enemy. The game also employs the mechanic of hidden items where touching certain areas will reveal gems or chests.
It's actually a pretty easy game. The only challenge stems from lack of extra lives, no checkpoints that I was able to find, and that there's no continues. So if you die in the stage, it's back to the beginning. If you get a game over, well, you're gonna start the game over.
I didn't find any checkpoints or notice them at the very least, and if there's continues, I never got any. The story is about Scrooge trying to become even more wealthy than he already is, and the villains from the cartoon trying to stop Scrooge from finding the treasures that he's looking for. It's a simple premise and a good game for its time. Do I think it's the best game ever made? Not by a long shot, because as technology improves, so will games. Best of its generation? It's good, but that's a matter of opinion. I think nostalgia plays heavily into people calling it the best game ever. They may have loved the cartoon as a kid, and therefore they love the game because they love the cartoon. That's how you are when you're a kid. If you love something, you love everything associated with it. But now let's take a look at Ducktales Remastered that came out last year in 2013. Ducktales Remastered was developed by WayForward Technologies, who are the same developers responsible for all the Shantae and Mighty Switch Force games, and a lot of licensed games. Capcom and Disney had been discussing a remake of the game in 2010, and development started late 2011 and the game was announced in 2012.
Now, it may just look like a graphical update to the original, and you wouldn't be wrong in thinking that, but things are tweaked to bring it up to today's standards in gaming.
The environments are done with 3D graphics on a 2D plane with hand-drawn sprites. This is always a style that I like for 2D platform games. The music is all updated versions of the 8-bit tracks, and the remake boasts voice acting with the surviving cast members of the original cartoon, as Joan Gerber, who played Mrs. Beakley, Hal Smith, who played Gyro Gearloose, and Flint Hart Gromgold, Hamilton Camp, who played Fenton Crackshell, all have passed away and have been replaced by Wendy Lee, Chris Edgerly, Brian George, and Eric Blaza. Alan Young and June Foray return to voice Scrooge and Magica De Spell. Their acting is rather flat, as if they're just reading off the script and they sound tired, but I'm not gonna blame them for that. Alan Young is 95 and June Foray is 97, and as morbid as this sounds, this may be the last thing they ever do. What really showed their age is when Magica De Spell left. It didn't sound genuine, and it sounded more like June Foray was trying not to cough. I am not criticizing them at all for their acting. I cannot morally because of their age. But the fact that they still sound like how those characters sounded from nearly 25 years ago despite their age is really amazing, and I give them a lot of credit for it. The story is pretty much the same, just more fleshed out with the voice acting, and the gameplay is more refined. Specifically the pogo jumping, because it didn't stop when landing on an edge and I didn't have to press down in addition to pressing the cane button.
And now the levels have an objective. Well, more so than the original, and I think that's really just to pad it out, because the original one you could beat in under an hour.
For each level you need to grab a certain number of items, like 9 coins in the Amazon, 3 pieces of Gizmo Duck's armor on the moon, 3 pieces of fuel injector for the mountains, and so on and so forth, giving you more of a sense of adventure. The game is easier as the life system is gone, giving you infinite chances, and there's a checkpoint system so you can continue close to where you left off. And the new physics work very much to your advantage, making platforming all the easier. The level layouts are similar in certain parts, but different at others. The bottom half of the Amazon is the same, but the top half is different. The bosses are different, Magica has more attacks, the Space Rat goes into a frenzy, making the bosses more challenging. Only slightly, though. Mrs. Beakley will show up at certain points and refill your health, but you'll more than likely be full on health before you even get to her. This game is also longer. From start to finish, it should take you about 2.5 hours, and that includes all the cutscenes and the dialogue, while the original NES game should take you about 45 minutes.
The cutscenes and dialogue are a nice touch, but they can be annoying because you can't skip it unless you have already beaten the game.
I don't mind the cutscenes, but I'm not playing this game for story, which, by the way, the dialogue is pretty clunky, and it can be irritating as it's longer than necessary and it pauses the game. If you kept going while the dialogue played, I think it'd be a little bit better because then you wouldn't have to wait. It's like the game is taking its time because it has a running time of 2.5 hours as opposed to the 22 minutes a typical cartoon has. I can read the dialogue a lot faster than the characters can speak it. Unfortunately, I don't think that the remake is worth $15 though. I suggest getting it at a discount if you're able to. When it comes down to which one is better, there really is no decision that can be made. Both games were made at different times and therefore are products of those times. The original was good for its time and offers more challenge in terms of traveling through the levels, while the remake offers more challenge in terms of the bosses and is a longer adventure. I personally like the remake more, mostly because I played it on my Wii U, which allowed me to play the game on the Wii U gamepad and watch Pawn Stars at the same time. While I emulated the NES game and was able to do the same, if I played it on an actual NES, I would not be able to do that. So in this case, technology wins for me.
Both games are pretty good, and they both offer their own experience, so this is a matter of you'll have to try each one to see which one you think is better.